If I had a nickel for every Eli Roth movie that has Cate Blanchett and Jack Black, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Welcome back to Movie Health Community, the internet's #1 source of health warnings at the movies. Borderlands is the newest video game movie after a long string of successes like The Last of Us and the Super Mario Bros. Movie and Gran Turismo. But before we talk about whether this movie stacks up to those projects, let's talk about if it's safe for photosensitive audiences. The answer is no. Borderlands is not safe for photosensitive audiences. Within the first 2 minutes of the movie, there are flickering, glowing rocks, kind of in a fantasy or sci-fi way, followed almost immediately by a bunch of glitching effects that take up the whole screen. There's a lot of gunfire, including from rapid firearms like machine guns. And late in the movie, right after a mystical arch is assembled, like immediately after, there are some very severe electrical effects. Those last probably the entire action sequence that follows. Finally, there is a scene where people duck into a dark hallway, and there are extreme strobe lights very shortly after they start going into this hallway. Because most of the strobe effects in this movie are unpredictable and they are interspersed throughout the whole movie, there really isn't much breathing room in between. We're giving Borderlands a 10 out of 10 for flashing lights. In terms of mental health, there is kidnapping, there is animal gore, there is a lot of gross out humor that involves urine and feces. Mostly urine. All the gross out humor about feces is just verbal. And right after the first time we see somebody teleport, we see somebody throw up in full view of the camera. Now, is Borderlands any good? I was trying to think of movies to compare this to. Obviously, we've got the fact that this is a video game movie, a movie based off of a popular video game. So you got people who are going to compare it to stuff like The Last of Us and the Super Mario Bros. Movie. A much more apt comparison for this movie, at least in terms of quality, would be Madam Web. This movie was awful. Now, if you've seen a lot of my recent videos, you'll know that I tend to hesitate a lot more when I'm giving a negative review to a smaller budget movie, especially if there's a first-time director attached. I want to encourage the careers of people who are up and coming in the film industry, whether they're doing a good job or not, quite frankly. And so for the smaller independent movies, I have a much harder time saying negative things about it. For movies with enormous budgets like this, there really aren't any excuses. You've got the money to drop on the right writers and the right directors and the right actors. And when you have that kind of money, you don't really have excuses on making a subpar product. And Borderlands is the perfect example of that. This movie evidently has an enormous budget, but especially in the writing and in the green screen work, this movie is kind of a big budget turd. They put a lot of polish on a turd, but it's still a turd. And that's not just me trying to draw an apt comparison. That's me engaging in the kind of humor that this movie engages in. There are good ways to engage in the types of humor that they attempt. And this movie doesn't do any of them right. There are ways to do endearing, annoying characters. And then you have Claptrap, who is just annoying with no endearing qualities about him at all. When you have a voiceover and you can take advantage of the fact that you have the person behind one of the most iconic voiceover openings in film history doing your voiceover, why is that one so terrible? I'm going to read you an actual line from this movie. And this isn't a spoiler of any kind. So if you are still intent on seeing this movie, I'm not going to give you any spoilers. But somebody taunts somebody by saying, "You in what army?" And the actual verbatim line, without hesitation, is, "The one behind me." And then, like, why do you need that line when you have the entire army assembling behind you? When it would work so much better if, say, the army assembling was interrupting the line, "You in what army?" You shouldn't even need your antagonist to say something in that moment. That's not remotely the only instance of terrible writing. The exposition in this movie is handled so poorly. I can definitely see why Craig Mazin wants his name removed from this movie, because there's no way that the final product of this movie was remotely written by the same person who wrote the Last of Us TV series and the Chernobyl TV series. I swear, you're looking at better green screen work right now than some of these scenes in this movie. And that's coming from someone who has had no formal training on getting a green screen setup just right. I cannot think of a single reason to recommend this movie. I cannot think of anything to redeem this movie. The only positive thing I can think about this movie is that the actors did an okay job with poor direction, and that the cosplays from this movie are going to be good. That's the thing. Everything that was real in this movie looked great. It's just that there was not a lot of it. I feel like the people who made Claptrap could learn a lot from the people who made BB-8 in how to incorporate a mix of practical and CG work. There was not a single shot of Claptrap where I was convinced, even remotely, that he was a real-life prop. So, yeah, I'm going to give Borderlands an F, and I don't feel the least bit bad about it. And knowing that Tim Miller was heavily involved in directing this movie, especially the 2 weeks of reshoots that they had to do, it's starting to make me think that Tim Miller is not what makes a movie good, and he is not the factor that made Deadpool so good. Anyway, little announcement for you guys. I am going to have to move residences again, and I have to do that pretty immediately. So for the remainder of August, I can maybe give you guys one more video evaluation, but the bulk of my August is going to be taken up by this move. So most of what you guys are going to see in August from our page, you're going to have to go to our Facebook and Tumblr pages for that. In fact, I'm going to make the decision right now while I'm filming this review that none of our releases are going to be Patreon exclusive or Patreon early throughout the remainder of August. This will be the last one we do that for in August. All of our evaluations are going to be in text form only, except for maybe the one or two that I might have too much to say that I want to do a video on. So yeah, we should be returning to normal as soon as September rolls around. Thank you so much for your patience. And I'll go ahead and jump right into my normal rehearsed outro now. Thank you so much to our readers on Tumblr and Facebook, and as always, an extra special thanks to our patrons over on our Patreon page, whose names are scrolling on the screen like credits right now. As a reminder, nothing produced by Movie Health Community is medical advice, nor has any of it been reviewed by any medical professionals. Be sure to leave a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when we post new videos, and leave a comment if you have anything to add to this discourse, especially if you disagree with anything I've said. We love hearing from you. And as always, stay safe at the movies.